tried many techniques to learn French from scratch, and with less than 3 years of experience, I was able to pass the B2 DELF exam without any stressful studying. I was always intent on improving my French in general, and I was focused on acquiring the language through a variety of methods as long as I found them to be personally interesting and fulfilling. And I managed to score a 71 out of 100, and the breakdown of my score felt really fair and felt like an accurate representation of the effort I had put into each category of skill that's tested. So I was proud of my score, especially considering I didn't study. And when I say I didn't study, I mean I didn't go to any extreme measures to force myself to learn. And I didn't try to memorize anything. And I didn't try to cram any information into my brain faster than it could actually be understood. But I am someone who loves learning and who's very curious about experimenting with different techniques. And I was motivated to acquire the French language using methods that worked well for my temperament and my attention span and my habits, which is all very personal. So even though I say I didn't study, I was definitely prepared, and my score is the proof of that. So this video is actually part 2 of a series where I talk about my experience leading up to taking the exam. And if you haven't already seen the first one, where I talk about my mindset and my perspective and how they were such big factors in why I was able to pass comfortably, then I will link the video here and in the description so you can also check that out. And in this video, I will cover the specific techniques that I thought were the most essential to my preparation and that really helped me pass in retrospect. And they may be methods that you haven't considered yet, beyond just doing grammar exercises or traditional prep courses. And I'll also go over a few tips and strategies that you can implement while you're taking the test to help improve your score. So first, the most impactful learning method that helped me on the exam was my practice of transcribing books. So I started doing this because while I was in one of my French classes at the Alliance Française, I noticed that I was having a lot of trouble spelling when I tried to write in French. And because everything is so digital nowadays in our day-to-day lives and in our work and even in our physical classrooms, it was clear that we just don't have as many opportunities to practice our handwriting skills as adults. And so in my textbooks, I just started copying words to practice writing them. And then I moved on to copying sentences, and then full paragraphs. And then I happened to pass by a bookstore close to my French school and saw this book in the window, which is called La langue anglaise n'existe pas, c'est du français mal prononcé, which is just a funny title for a book about linguistics and the history of many words that share interesting origins between the French and English languages. And you don't necessarily have to use this book. You can do it with any other book in French that you find interesting. But what I started to do once I got this was to spend up to 30 minutes a day just copying the chapters into a notebook. And I knew that this was helping me with spelling and vocabulary, but beyond that, I was also just finding it really meditative and relaxing. And if I didn't set a timer, then I would probably just continue for hours and lose track of time. But it became a little daily ritual that I would do when taking a break from work or when I'm winding down in the evening and want to relax. And it was essentially just replacing time I would otherwise spend scrolling on social media. So it really had so many benefits. But I think the biggest benefit as it relates to preparing for the B2 DELF exam was that handwriting is very physical. And if you're not used to it, like I was before I started transcribing, your arm and wrist can get physically tired or strained, or you could have a cramp. So I remember when I was taking the test and writing the essay, I was telling myself how grateful I was to have already had the muscle memory of physical handwriting, so that I was capable of writing quickly. And I was able to put my focus into organizing my original thoughts into a decent essay without being distracted by the physical strain of writing, because thanks to this technique, I was already used to it. And I remember using every last minute of our allotted time to write during the test. and at the end I counted that I had written 280 words, and the minimum requirement for the essay is 250 words. So I understood that to mean if you don't meet the minimum word requirement, then there's a possibility that the score could be disqualified. So I was very grateful that I had this experience to be able to avoid disqualification. And if you want to try this method, you can structure it however you want, but all you need is a book and a blank notebook that you can fill with your handwriting and a pen. I will share some of my favorite books in French that I've read in the description below in case you're looking for any recommendations. So the next method I recommend trying that really helped me be prepared for the oral comprehension section and also the oral production section was listening to podcasts. And not just any podcast, but the one that I personally loved, especially when I just started learning French, was called Little Talk in Slow French. I will link it below for you to check out yourself. But essentially, the format of each podcast episode covers a current event or an interesting topic. And the host will speak about the content slowly, and it will sometimes include some translations or anecdotes or helpful explanations. And then at the end of each episode, the host then repeats everything, but at a normal pace. So I just thought this was such a helpful technique to train myself to listen and to anticipate and get familiar with understanding at a faster and more natural pace that you would encounter in the real world. And at the same time, you're also learning vocabulary on themes and current events that may appear on your test. And because the pace kind of evolves throughout the course of each episode, while you're hearing the host express a perspective on a given topic, you're also able to develop your own understanding and your own perspective about the content that's being covered in the podcast. And being able to express your own original ideas and opinions and perspective is essential for both the written and oral production sections on the test. In my case, when taking the exam, just to give you an example, for the speaking portion, the topic I chose was about rail networks and their environmental impact as compared to other methods of transportation. I don't remember now the exact questions I needed to address, but while taking the test, I had remembered that there was a podcast episode from Little Talk in Slow French specifically about this topic that I had listened to. And I think because I had this experience and this exposure to this topic, I was able to craft a response that incorporated a variety of vocabulary that more or less addressed the questions at hand. And beyond that, kind of in an effort to fill time, I also attempted to articulate my personal preferences for travel and my experience taking trains as a solo female traveler, and also make comparisons of the rail network in France to the lack of a rail network in the US, which is where I'm from. So just based on my own experience, I think the speaking portion of the test does ask that you use correct grammar and that you articulate clear ideas and perspectives for both the monologue and the debate. But at the heart of it, it really is just an opportunity to express what you know about the topic you chose. And I think also for the debate portion, it helps to think of it just as a conversation amongst adults. I think having this perspective makes it a little less stressful. At least that's how I viewed it, and I managed to score 15 points on oral comprehension section, so not bad. And my next recommendation is actually a technique that I didn't start using personally until after passing the DELF B2 exam. But it is just such a powerful method that I need to share it. And I think if I had done this before taking the test, I would have scored even higher. But the method I love to recommend is dictation. I've posted another video purely about this method and how it transformed my comprehension and my ability to produce while really sharpening my listening skills all at the same time. So you can watch that video next, but just to give you a short summary, dictation, or dictée, is the practice of someone reading a passage out loud to you in French, and you have to write down everything you hear. I personally love doing this with my Preply tutor, so I get real feedback. But there are also other YouTube creators or other websites dedicated solely to this practice, which I will link for you in the description below. So those are my recommendations for techniques to try as you prepare for taking the exam. And next, I just want to share some helpful strategy that you can implement while taking the test that can help you improve your score. If you watched part 1 of this video series, I talk about how I only looked at one module of my online DELF B2 prep course before deciding that it was boring and never opened it up again. But in that single module, I learned that in the comprehension sections, all of the answers appear in order chronologically within the content. So this is especially helpful for the reading comprehension section because you can go back and forth between the text and the multiple choice options. But essentially, let's say if you are confident about your answer to question number 1, but you're not confident about the answer for question number 2. If that happens, you don't waste any time and you move on to question number 3. And if you can be confident about your answer to question number 3, then using these answers as markers, you can reduce the amount of text that you will have to revisit to find the answer to question number 2. So that was a useful tip that helped me score a 23.5 on the reading comprehension section. And then my next tip or strategy that you can use while taking the test is to borrow vocabulary and verbs from the multiple choice portions to use in your essay. When I took the test, hopefully this is still the case, but the reading comprehension and the listening comprehension sections, which were both multiple choice, are taken on the same day as the written essay portion of the exam. And then the oral speaking portion is at a later date and time. But when it came to writing the essay, I still had access to all of the material from the multiple choice sections. So if I was unsure about the spelling of a word or the gender of a word or the spelling of a verb in a specific tense, if I remember that it appeared anywhere within the reading comprehension text or in any of the multiple choice options, then I could go back to verify it. And that, I think, at least helped me avoid losing points over any misspelled words. So that's it. Those are all my most relevant tips. I hope that this was helpful or offered any additional insight or perspective as you prepare to take the B2 test. If you have any questions about my experience taking the test or have any thoughts about my advice or about your experience, then definitely leave a comment below because I'm always happy to connect. I've also posted a video describing all the methods and techniques I've tried to improve my French, which I'll link below, along with a post from my blog with a timeline of when I started incorporating each method during my first 3 years of learning French and before taking the DELF B2 exam. But really, everything I've gone over in this video is the advice I give to my friends or anyone who asks me what they could do to get ready for the test. I'm very passionate about learning new things, whether it be languages or new skills, and my channel here is really about the importance of embracing your hobbies, especially as an adult. And it's about knowing that it's never too late to get started. So if that sounds like you, then feel free to check out my other videos and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.